Welcome everyone to this session of Investment Masterminds. This should be a fun session today. It's really going to be more of an open conversation and dialogue. Originally, when I set it up, I said, I was talking to Cheryl, Tracy, and Suzanne. I said, hey, why don't we talk about different obstacles that women have to go through in financial services, how do we get more gender equality and all that stuff? And Cheryl kind of made the point, which she's great at that it's not just about the women in financial services, because you have to really include the male allyship, if that's even a word, that backs that up, because I mean the industry is still 90% plus men, and so if it's just a conference that all women go to and feel great about, that's great and that's awesome, but it's not spreading the word to the 90% of the industry that needs to advocate for more diversity, both in gender and in racial equality within the industry. I love the way I look, but I want the industry to look more like our country does, and we haven't gotten there nearly yet. And we're doing some work not only with this panel, but I've been involved with the FinServe Foundation that Jamie Hopkins got me involved in, and I know that Cheryl is involved in as well. So having young, diverse minds in the industry coming from college, going to college campuses, mentorships, bringing them through the whole cycle and getting them into the financial services field, which is a lot of fun. So with that, I want to introduce Tracy Shugart. She's the CEO of the Premier Wealth Management Group of Cambridge Financial Services. So I believe, Tracy, you have the largest OSJ of Cambridge, woman-run OSJ of Cambridge.
Yes, that is correct. Yes,
excellent.
We have 73 advisors, so only 11 of them women, which I would love to change, but.
Yeah, but that's still a pretty good ratio. I mean,
it is actually.
Yeah. And then we have Suzanne Norman. She's the founder of Suzanne Norman Consulting. She also has a very full resume of, the Alliance for Lifetime Income. And I don't want to say how long, but decades of experience of helping advisors and clients and financial literacy and wellness and all that great stuff. So I love having Suzanne on. She's been to a lot of my live events as well. The most recent one in Boston, which she did an incredible job at. And then we have Cheryl Hickerson, and Cheryl is the CEO of Females in Finance. One of my favorites. Swan is a sponsor of Females in Finance. And she does a great job of bringing people together and discussing topics that really are impactful for the audience today. So I'm really excited about this panel discussion. I'd like to hear a little bit. I know that Cheryl's been on, Suzanne's been on before. Tracy, could you just give us a little bit of the background of how you've gone to become the CEO of Premier Wealth?
Sure. So I was actually a teacher by trade. So I was teaching and substitute teaching and started working at an insurance agency. And there was a gentleman, speaking of male allyship, there was a gentleman there who I did a lot of projects with, getting presentations ready and that sort of thing. And he kind of took me under his wing and mentored me. And he started the investment side of the business and asked me to come over and be his, business manager, which I did. And then I was with him for about a year, and he asked me if I wanted to be a partner. And if I wanted to be a partner, I had to study and get all my securities licenses. And I did it all in 18 months and went from there. And he just kind of pushed me along and made me believe I could do it when I didn't even think I could do it. Because, when you get into this business, you think it's all about math. And that just kind of turned me off. But he reassured me that it wasn't that there was more to it than math. There was a lot more going on, and that I was more than capable of doing it. And I did it. I cried learning options, but I did it. And it's been a great business for me, and he's now retired. And when he retired, I became the CEO, and it's going great. It's just an awesome business to be in. I would encourage anybody to jump in. It's hard in the beginning. It takes perseverance, but if you can stick it out, it's really a great field to be involved in.
Yeah, and it's a great point about the math, Tracy, because it's such a small part of what financial advisors actually. I mean, it's basically software for that, right?
It's all tech stack. Yeah.
There's an
Mhm.
app for that, right?
Yep.
So, you know, the human element and the emotional support that you have to give to clients and those type of things are, I mean, that's ubiquitous. That's men, that's women, that's everybody, right? And
Yes.
and
Yeah.
especially the sensitivity side, which, you know, men tend to lack. You know, there's plenty of clients out there, investors out there that don't have a real connection with their advisor because they just think it's the math, right? And
Right.
that's part of the
Right.
problem.
And I think the future, what's in the cards for the future, I think is going to make that even more important. You know, we see more and more women becoming breadwinners and being entrepreneurs, and they're
Mhm.
looking for a different kind of advisor. And that's going to play a huge role in where the industry goes, is getting rid of the math end of it and getting more into the relationship end of it. So, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of the psychology of investing, Suzanne, so how did you go from being a psychology major in college to getting into the financial service side of things?
It was, as I fond of saying, it was on purpose by accident. So I declared a philosophy major, which everyone laughed and said, What are you gonna do with that?" So I migrated to psych, which I did graduate with a BA in psychology, and then fell in love with photography. So I have this phonetic thing happening: philosophy, psychology, photography, and then finance. But it's interesting because the people have heard me tell the story a lot, but I took a temp job. I had just moved to San Francisco and was going around with my portfolio of photography, and took a temp job and just in the meantime. And the interesting thing for me is, I grew up with a feminist mother, went to a women's college, and when I took this temp job, it was to support a female financial advisor. And the top advisors in this company were women, and the sales manager, was a woman. And so when I talk about how it just really, was a very different environment to what we're obviously going to talk about today, but that was my entree. And it felt really normal. I thought, oh, well, this is parity. This is kind of the world that I've grown up in. And to the prior comment about math, I had been very good at math. And then I don't know if it was teen, drama, trauma, whatever, but I sort of got away from it. But I've always loved math. And to be able to combine those skills, and there is a reason why the Financial Therapy Association is out there, by the way, because most, I think, successful advisors over the years I've presented, I've said, if you've been in this business 10 years or more, I'm being very arbitrary, but I'm giving it 10 years, you have an honorary degree in psychology, because you really are a money or financial therapist with people if you're doing it right. Meaning, if you still buy into this sort of idea that I'm going to outperform the other guy or girl, then you're probably not necessarily being that comprehensive wealth manager that people need. But anyway, so that's how I got into it. And to answer your question, it was 1992. And I will make a funny comment before you move on to Cheryl, but Tracy, back to licensing, when they asked me about it, because I had a liberal arts undergrad, right? I
Mhm.
thought, is this security clearance? What is this? I'll pass. It's not a problem. And what you don't know sometimes, and my coaching comes into this, what we focus on, but I had no idea. I just thought it was fun. And, one of my core values is learning. So they said, you need to get your Series 7 in a month. And
Mm.
I oh,
Mm-hmm.
thought, well,
geez.
how hard can that be? And I actually had a lot of fun, because again, back to sort of risk and reward, I didn't feel high risk, right? It was fun. Yeah. So
Mhm.
anyway, so that's how it all started back in 1992.
Well, ironically, I work for a company that does options, right? It's the core component of what we do. And that was definitely the worst part of my Series 7
Oh,
was the options for my scoring. So now I'm much better. For
I'm I'm
anybody
glad to
listening.
hear that, Jeff. Thank you for. I know my
Hey,
last
it's
job,
on.
just by the way, if we think options are hard, my last job, I had to get my Series 3.
oh.
So, but again, back to,
Oh.
fearless,
Mhm.
right? Just do it. So,
Mhm.
Absolutely.
yeah.
So Cheryl, I mean, this was kind of your brainchild, this idea and this concept that you've been doing within females in finance, and really doing a great job of bringing on male allies and partners to the program. So I
Thanks.
wanted to see, how did you come up with this thought that I think is much different than all the other type of programs I've seen
Yeah.
in that side of the industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Suzanne, I was also looking for a job in San Francisco in 1992.
Oh,
I had driven from St. Louis, Missouri to San Francisco because, I saw it on television and thought this is where people go to get,
beautiful.
fancy jobs. I had $1,000 saved, thought I was rich. I was so poor. And copied my resume out of the book in Kinko's in Berkeley, California. And Christina Applegate, it worked for her. And Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. So I thought I'll try it too. And I actually did end up getting a job, Mass Mutual. So shout out to insurance people because it is the gateway a lot of times for us to get in. But they took a chance on somebody who knew very little about anything really in life. I had lived in a fairly small town and I had a male ally, Robert Brumby, who hired me. He's still my mentor today, 33 years later. This man brought me in. He was a teacher as well, Tracy. So when he said that, I thought, gosh, this is like warming my heart. I
Yeah.
still think that teachers make really great financial advisors. So shout out to the teachers out there. But he made me feel like I could do anything. I thought I didn't have the confidence to say I knew these
Mhm.
things. And he kept saying, to your point, Jeff, you don't have to. We have tech. And this was like crappy tech back in the day. Let's just be really honest.
We didn't
here,
even
folks.
really have internet.
No.
Yeah.
We had a C prompt.
Right.
Look that up for the young people. DOS. Okay. It was
Yeah.
a really rough time, but we did have some tech that was out there to help us do that job. And as we've obviously grown in this profession, so has our tech. But what hasn't grown is our ability to bring and invite more women into the conversation. Yes, from an administrative perspective. I contend that if every woman today got up administratively from their job and left financial services, we would fail as an industry. Okay. So how do we move them from that to the other things, which are client facing, some of the technical components of like what Tracy just shared and what Suzanne as well, talking about getting a series 3. I mean, women are really good at doing a lot of things. The male allyship component is really instrumental to giving the lift, the momentum, or as Melinda Gates always said, the moment of lift. That moment right there is usually coming from, and I never say male dominated, it's male powered. We're a male powered environment today in financial services. We can change the power element. I don't feel dominated. And I think that that's where those little nuances change the way we look at stuff. One thing that worked to my advantage in this and coming 30 plus years in this is the fact that I've had male allies. And so when we built Females in Finance, it was this idea of, I want to win, but that doesn't mean you lose, Jeff. That means we both win. And guess what? We both get to win, and Tracy does, and Suzanne does, and everybody else gets to win too. It's not pie. It's not just one slice. There's enough for everybody. And so I really think that that's a super critical, important part of what equity looks like today and how we understand it. Because I think that somebody thinks in order for Tracy to win that they have to lose. And that's just not so. And so that's what our organization is super hyper focused on, is how do we develop our members professionally, and personally as well, because don't think we can get away with this without behavioral finance today and mindsets, but also relationship equity. How do we combine that with relationship equity we've all built over these years so that we can unify the profession? Because I think that that's really where the change happens. And we can't take men out of the dialogue when they've been a major part of it all these years. We just need their assistance in it.
Well, and I think too, Cheryl, you really hit on something too, because I think so often, I know me, sometimes I have 73 advisors, most of them are men, and I try to be very careful that I'm not saying something that I don't want to make it sound like men are better than women or women are better than men. So I think you've really hit a way to make it a positive that we're different.
Yeah.
It's just inherent that we're different, but how you're approaching it is very positive. I don't think it's a turnoff for people.
Yeah.
Tracy,
I really appreciate that.
When I was going to add that my going away retirement party, I shared a sentiment. Everyone at my firm knew my passion for women's empowerment and, my pivot rewirement that was coming. Anyway, one of the slogans that I shared got a lot of positive response, which was gratifying, which is I said, to be pro-female is not anti-male.
Yeah.
And so
That's
to
it.
your point, Cheryl, right? Zero sum. I mean, we're so, back to the numbers,
Yeah.
right? We're so used to this, control and this power and, the shift and, it's this binariness. And I know, we talk about it in society at large now, the case for pluralism. We can have two things at the
Yeah.
same time
Mhm.
that do not shift the power, the pie, you said.
Yeah. Well, and like, and to going back to you, like you're multi-passionate. You
Mhm.
have things that you love doing this and you love doing that. You don't have to give up one for the other. I think the other thing too, I told the story before, I think Jeff's heard it, but it's important. I have 14 grandkids and they're my life. I tell everybody if I can get paid to do that shtick every day, they think I'm amazing. Okay. Cause I am, I'm an amazing grandma. But my oldest two are a set of twins, Jason Carter, who Jace loves to tell Carter he's oldest, and he's like 9 minutes, dude. It was 9 minutes. He's like, it counts, it counts. But they have a younger sister. Her name's Avery, and they had come to the house and they wanted some ice cream. And of course, I'm grandma. I'm giving them anything they want. I don't listen to my son. So I go out and get a bowl and I scoop the ice cream in. Avery runs in and she's like, me too. I want ice cream. And I said, oh, no problem. So I pull the bowl down. I scoop in and I give her a scoop of ice cream. She looks down and she looks at her brothers and she goes, how come mine's not the same size? And I said, oh, I'm sorry. So I reached in to put the scoop of ice cream to even it out, and without missing a beat, Jason Carter said, well, why is she getting the same? She's because thinking she's smaller. And I said, why do you care? It's not coming out of your bowl. And they stopped for a second. And I said, and you know what your job is? You should be advocating for her to get the exact same amount of ice cream as you do. So you watch for her when you go out places. And if somebody comes up and doesn't give her the same amount, it's your job to use your voice to make certain that she gets exactly the same amount you get. So if my 13 at the time year old grandsons can understand equity, grown people can understand equity.
Mhm.
It's just everybody gets to win.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm trying to do. I don't want Jeff to be less than in order for me to be more.
Mhm.
I want us to both be equal. And that's just where it comes in as equity. So it's a really, it's a hard, and I really appreciate Tracy, what you said, because it's really hard to kind of manage that throughout the time. Because I do want to make certain that everybody is being seen and there's a, equal in that part, but I don't think that bashing people for mistakes of the past or things that other
Right.
people did is going to
Mhm.
make our situation better. I'm
Yeah.
trying to look at how do we make financial services the most welcoming profession industry for a woman to go, yeah, that's what I want to do when I leave college, or that's what I want to do when I leave high school. We've got a lot of work to do, but I think we do better together than we do separate.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
bias goes both ways.
Yeah, it does.
Meaning that I think we all probably agree, and that's why Jeff invited us, which we've certainly benefited from amazing, sincere male allyship and
True.
sponsorship. Because you were mentioning, Cheryl, sort of the push. I always think of it the pull, right? The sponsorship is a pull up, right? An invitation. But I think that we also have to check our biases,
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
well, Cheryl, I was
just
just gonna say, if you could talk to my 7-year-old, my 7-year-old's Cole and my 5-year-old's Mia,
Yeah.
and having a
And they're
real
pretty
problem with
cute.
that whole. What's that?
They're pretty cute. I've seen
Oh
them.
yeah, yeah, that's the problem. They're too cute. There's no discipline. But yeah, he's always just jealous of everything she has, and I just keep on trying to. That I love
And
that.
well,
I think-
and that's just it. What you just said is it's work. This is
Yes.
work that we're doing. I think sometimes people will say, when I first started Females in Finance, it was like, oh, this is this cute little Facebook group. I'm like, no, 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 no. This is like legitimate work. And trust me, it is work. It's making certain that looking at when I go to events and stuff, I love when people come to me. My favorite thing that I hear from male allies, by the way, is what can I do better? Or how can I be a part? What I can't do and I won't do because I'm just too old. They'll come to me and say something like, why do you people? As soon as it starts with that, I'm like, just stop, go fax something. You're in the 90s. I don't have time.
Yeah.
We're past this now. It's how do we work together? I love that question because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Like we
Mhm.
just legitimately don't know that we have an unconscious bias, which by the way, every person listening right now or on a replay, raise your hand. You have an unconscious bias. It's just like and I know Suzanne knows all of the psychology behind it to keep us safe. It's how we live our lives to do that. But I do believe that as we age and we become smarter, when you know better, you do better. You start saying, okay, hold on. I remember that lady Cheryl one time said, maybe I should take a look at my book of business and say, do I have different appointments this week? Or all these people look exactly the same? Or let me look out at my audience of the, the people who work in my audience. Could I be doing a better job at interviewing some people? It just starts with a conversation with yourself and
Well,
just being really honest.
You just made me think of something, Cheryl, back to, that being aware, right? The self-awareness, and also look at the room. And I'm certain that we have all very consistently been the only woman in the room. My best example back to, we give a problem or present a problem, we present a solution, right? So
Yes.
one of my favorite stories is Christine Lagarde, who you may
Oh,
know
yeah.
had that rule when
Yep.
she was head of the IMF, and basically she would not attend a meeting if she was the only woman in the room.
Woman. Yeah.
And so back to advocacy, meaning we can do it women for women and men as well, but being aware of what that says with the physical environment that we're in, as well as the internal environment we're talking about.
Yeah, I tell about it this way. There's awareness. I'm aware that there's a problem. Okay. Then there's acceptance. I'm part of the problem and probably the solution. I'm going to adoption. I'm going to adopt principles that other people are doing, and then adaption. I'm going to adapt it to my business or my work. So if you can remember awareness, acceptance, adoption, adaption, that's really what you're talking about when it comes to unconscious bias, or anything for that matter, but specific to making financial services welcoming to women. And I always start with women first, the DEI second. Women are not part of the DEI. FYI, every single person right now watching, a woman brought you here. Okay. We're the only market. We're literally the only market because we are the vessel, the sole creators. Okay. So if that's the case, then how we need to separate that out of DEI, but DEI is the very next part of the work that we do. So I'm very female centric first, DEI centric second. And I feel like that has been the thing that has led me down this path with females in finance, to make it a rich, welcoming, fun, because fun's important, environment to be around some of the very best, most amazing minds that are out there in financial services today.
Yeah, I from my perspective, and just listening to what Cheryl was just saying, I had a very fortunate experience when pretty much the first, I was financial advisor for a year with MetLife, and just got my chops and decided to go to the dark side of wholesaling as an internal wholesaler. But I was working with Evergreen Investments, which became Wells Fargo Funds eventually. But they were great at promoting women to different seniority levels. So the president of the company was a woman. The national sales manager is a woman. And my direct manager on the inside sales desk, Joanne Ward, who is my first real great mentor, who was thought of as extremely tough, but she was very fair. And just getting the acceptance from her was a big deal, because everybody I'd ever worked with before, it was still that mentality. I mean, we see all these movies, and I actually just had this webinar with a woman named Lori Van Dusen, who wrote Running with Grace, who I'll get everybody on this call a copy of if you want to email me at jeff.thomas for the audience, jeff.thomas@swanglobalinvestments.com. And she talks about really going through in the 80s, working in the pits of Sherman Lehman Brothers and working her way up, and 100 different advisors coming into the class, and there's only 2 women, and she successfully was able to raise $8 billion by the time she went independent in the firm. So, which was a huge success story. But it's interesting, as I was talking to her, and we used to watch these movies, like the inside sales desk guys, because there were 90% guys, 99% would watch Wolf of Wall Street, or Boiler Room, or all these, in Wall Street, right? And every one of those movies ended terribly, right? It was like all this bad behavior. And then in the end, the moral of the story was this shouldn't be replicated. Yet, what were the lessons that came out for the young professionals? This is how we're going to sell, right? That's the thought, right? It's like they ignored the ending, and there's this alternative ending where it all became okay, right? So I went from that atmosphere to having great female leadership, and they trained me how to be a professional in this industry, right? And so that was a huge mentorship for me. And I'll always thank Joanne Ward for being so tough and difficult, because only the true cream rose to the top. It wasn't a buddy system. It wasn't, hey, are we watching a football game together? It's how hard are you working, and are you doing the right things to become successful? And that was rewarded. And that was a great experience for me.
You know, I spoke at the CFA, was it the CFA Society in Austin, Texas, and Bill Seaman had me come down and speak there. And the gentleman who spoke before me, if you ever want to hear about like a not a great male ally, was Andrew Fasto, who was the CFO of Enron. And ironically, he was there to teach ethics. Crazy, right?
Don't do what
Okay.
I did.
But what I loved, and still remember this, gosh, it's been almost 8 years now since that happened. Because I'm like, I have to follow up the CEO of Enron. Like, how do you do that? Like, that's in my brain going, I got to talk. But he got up there and he stopped before he started anything. He stopped and he said, to any person in this room who my decisions affected you negatively, I am so sorry. Do you know how powerful that apology was? Because I mean, he did bad things. Let's just be, they all did bad things, but he was, and what he talked about in that hour of CE that they were earning for ethics was the importance of making the right decision the first time. It's not over here just doing like a little bit of the work, or because he says it all started with that's not too terrible. I mean, he knew it was terrible, but it wasn't too terrible. It's all it took, that one little decision, and then it became more and more and more and more, right? I think that's the exact same thing for what we're talking about today too. It's making that one decision, going, you know what? I'm going to stay consistent and be, the best version of myself, and I'm going to do for others and stuff like that. But the fact that he really messed up, I mean, really bad, went to jail, right? He said he was sorry, and it was heartfelt. And I love the men the male allies who come to me and say, I'm so sorry. I do think I was part of the problem, but I do want to be part of the solution. Oh, that goes so far. And then they're opening their brain up to being, you know what? This is where I saw some areas that you can do some work. How can I help you get there? Because that's what I want to do. I'm like, how do I stand beside you and say that? And I've had people come to me, I'll be very transparent on this call, where I've stood up to some people that have probably done some not great things in the past and say, how do you do that? I said, because we're human beings and we mess up, and now we're here to do things right. And that's how we get the conversation to change. That's how you move the Titanic. And so it's a lot of work, but we're only going to get there when we have the very best, and we present ourselves in the very best way. And we all make mistakes. I mean, let's just be honest, because, I think Suzanne said it best. It's like, we all have unconscious bias. And we've all done things that, how do we now realize, okay, that wasn't the best ending to the story? Because the story does, Jeff, you're right. It does end poorly. We do look at that and go, that wouldn't happen to me. I wouldn't have spent that money. I wouldn't have bought that yacht. Yes, you would have. Yes, you would have.
Slippery slope. Well,
Yeah.
the other thing you're making me think of, Cheryl, too, is it's connected to allyship in the
Yeah.
sense that we have so many great lessons to see from all the research that's coming out with emotional intelligence and leadership. And while, we're still pretty low from a standpoint of percentages of women leaders in this industry or in general, there's a lot of really powerful research out there to talk about this vulnerability, this
Yes.
compassionate leadership. And, so it informs, men, and certainly I think, puts women in a very positive light as well. Because the other thing that we haven't touched upon yet, Jeff, but, with the case for the business case for women in this industry, I wrote a series of papers when I was at Milliman, and some now as an education fellow for the Alliance. But this case for more female advisors, and the fact that we've got this massive wave of succession that's happening in this industry. And we've also got this convergence of all the women that need to be served as clients in this industry. And I am, Jeff's heard me say it a number of times with my Wealthy Women programming, male advisors can do a fantastic job with their female clients. There's no question. The females are telling us some other things, right, from a client standpoint. But I guess the bottom line here is that emotional intelligence and that appreciation of that ability for women to be in this space to help solve problems. And, and frankly, there's a lot of research too about maybe less ethical breaches from a leadership standpoint. But that's probably another podcast.
No, but really quick, I want to say something about that, because we talked about this in Miami at Fearless Women's Summit, and it was about cognitive empathy. I think that any human being who can dig deeper into cognitive empathy in this men and women. Because women, let's just be honest. I mean, we're not always the most touchy feely, lovey. I mean, that doesn't necessarily happen naturally to every person. And that's okay. But you can learn cognitive empathy. You can go in and study what that looks like. And those who are practicing and working on it on the daily, who are willing to take constructive feedback. I always say feedback's fuel, and say, oh, I could have said it this way better, and that would have been better received. I think they're going to be the big winners in this financial services game of working with clients with the money bags of what's going on with the women, because they do hold a lot of the money that's coming, this transfer of wealth, and being ready. And if you could just say to yourself, honestly, like, am I very empathetic? No. If you just can't get there, hire people to do that work instead. And I do think women overwhelmingly do a very good job of being empathetic.
Well, and Tracy, you said it earlier too, which is, there's been this fairly seismic shift in the industry, right? Back to it's commoditized. If you don't have an X factor, a value proposition to make yourself stand out from the competition, and it's not performance. We know that. I mean, it's not. So this planning culture that's coming into the fore. I think that, in this last note that I wrote for the Retirement Income Institute, I talk about some of the things that I think are really relevant to, your point too, Cheryl, but, listening skills. Jeff, you have that great metaphor. I actually used it the other day about the lunch plate of food. But, having those open-ended questions, thinking about, yourself as a financial therapist, getting into that mode of planning, because frankly, and I'm going to maybe just veer into the women's lane as a client from a client standpoint, but it's also practitioners, meaning that walking in her shoes can be very helpful. Yes, you can learn empathy. But women come with needs like, help me with this divorce. I know gray divorce, my likelihood of my quality of life is going to decline significantly more, twice as bad as his. The fact that 49% of women over age 65 will be unpartnered. They'll be single, they'll be widowed. These are things on their minds, right? Long-term care, career, negotiation skills, childcare, elder care, estate planning, all these sort of important problems that's frankly what I think most advisors are in the business to do, is solve problems.
Well, I think you have to be holistic when you work with a woman, because they're always thinking about the future, and, they're not caught up in the return that they're going to have. They're worried about what's going to happen to my legacy, what's going to happen to my children, how are my children going to take care of me? I don't want to be a burden. So it's a whole different shift in the conversation. You can't just talk about the investments. You have to talk about the health insurance, the long-term care, the whole thing.
Yeah. And if you're a male, great. Just know these things are on their mind. If you're a woman, back to bias working in our favor, if a woman walks in with these concerns and sees a woman, she kind of knows that she's been thinking about it too. So there is sort of a business case, I think, for cultivating that other,
Yeah, I think men have a tendency when it comes to anything emotionally tied to procrastinate. I mean, I'm a epic procrastinator in general. But when it comes to these conversations about, even when my wife and I are having conversations about just what we're doing over the next couple of weeks or months or whatever else, it's when you think about planning and you think about wellness, the men just say, hey, you know what, it's fine. We'll do this later. It's, we'll cross that path if I get sick or if I'm unhealthy. Why aren't we even talking about this right now? We get so many other things going on. Whereas my wife is thinking, well, what happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? So I think it's so important to, and at the end of the day, and as Cheryl and everybody was talking about, isn't it great when doing the right thing is also the thing that makes you successful?
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's really what we're talking about here, is giving a voice to both people at the table and making sure you're listening to both of them. And the lunch conversation is, if you're at lunch with someone and your plate is still full and theirs is empty, that means that you've been talking the whole time. Right? That should be at least equally distributed between the two plates. So, if you're listening to both halves of the couple and you're absorbing that information and you're hearing the needs and you're not just thinking of what one or other is thinking, that's the right thing to do. And that will make you more successful. You know, long term, it'll sustain your business. The succession planning, if one spouse dies and now you have the conversations with the children and those type of things, all that goes away for focusing on one half of that relationship.
You know, one
Like
question I
70
used to,
Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Suzanne. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to give a stat, which is, this is repeated time and time again, and I just put it in another paper recently, but 70% of widows are indicating that they leave the financial advisor when the husband dies.
Mhm.
And that really is very telling about, is she seen, is she heard, is she engaged? Because to be fair, of course, to Jeff's point, in a marriage, or partnership, clearly there's delegation of duties. But we don't have this as a luxury. It is a requirement as women. And, so anyway, but I thought the
And-
70% is pretty
Well,
Well,
telling.
yeah, that's like looking at your clients right now today and saying all the women that are in your book of business right now,
Mhm.
75% of them, let's just round up, 75% are going to leave you. Are you prepared for that? And then they go, what? Yeah, they're going to, because the stats don't lie. I mean, we know the numbers and they're true. One thing I do ask, when talking about empathy and talking about what's important and with women, I think this is a really interesting thing that an exercise I used to do when I used to, work with clients face to face. And I'd ask them, like, have you ever been to like the Embassy Suites where you can see the hotel, the hotel, you can see the elevators going up and down, right? You can see those outside. And they're like, yeah. I said, if I put you in front of an elevator that had one pulley, and you didn't have to know anything about elevators, and the other elevator has 6 pulleys, who are the people that, which elevator would you choose? It's rhetorical. They're going to say 6, right? Who are the people you would put in that elevator? Who are the most important people in your life? And a woman will never, ever mention herself. She will say, oh, my kids and my grandkids and my mother, because she's in the nurse. And you should be writing these names down or making a mental note of this, because these are the people that she's probably going to be taking care of when she's alone, because a lot of us are going to end up, and probably our husbands, or if you're in a traditional relationship with predeceased, a lot of people are aging solo. As we know, gray divorce is very, very real. COVID, boy, it opened up a whole box of, worms on that one.
Mhm.
But what's interesting is what I tell them is, I'm so glad you picked the 6 pulley elevator. Do you know why? And of course they think it's 6 pulleys. I'm like, no, each one of those are a part of your financial plan. This is your longevity plan. And if it snaps, and guess what? You got 5 more pulleys to help those people get to where you need to go. This one's going to be your, whether it's your disability, you get hurt or something. This is your life insurance. If something, each one of those represents a part of the financial plan. So you can pick your number of pulleys. The point of it is, for women, I don't care about returns. I don't understand buckets, and because that stuff doesn't resonate with me. Those people do. And it's heart business that we're in. And I want to know that if I'm sending them up on that and one of those breaks, they keep going. I don't want it to stop. And I think that that's where the empathetic part and understanding who's important to them and writing these things down, it's such a simple exercise. And yet it's so telling about who that person's going to mention, that they're most important people in their lives. And they never mention themselves. Never.
You
I love
made me
that.
think, Cheryl, in the tips that I just put in this note that I wrote, the onboarding, and I know we're sort of talking more about clients here, but this can be, as you're interviewing a woman, right? I mean, these are amazing skills to apply from, my coaching world, but, what are your core values, right? I mean, once you get that is the operating manual for your life. Those tend to be pretty fixed, right? Asking people what those are. And then, the worry list, you just mentioned it too. And Tracy, I mean, if we're not engaging, and Cheryl, you said the heart, right? Because this is a profession where there's head and there's heart, right? This is, you've got to have both. But knowing what those are ahead and asking,
Mhm.
people want to talk about it. Women
do.
want to talk about it.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you lead with the math, and you win the client, you'll lose with the math and you lose the client. And the times when the market comes down or anything else, they're focusing on just the short term. They're focusing on the numbers. They're not thinking the emotional response, which is, at the end of the day, like you said, we are in the business of psychology. I mean, investing would be easy if you took out all the emotions out of it, right? If there was no emotions in investing, then there probably would be no need for financial advisors, right? I mean, it would be.
And men would perform as well as women do.
I know.
Because
I
we actually
can
are better
attest to that in my own
investors. We're
account.
better investors.
Yeah, we are
You
better
know, we don't
investors.
trade as much. We don't do the hot dot. You know, we
Yep.
diversify. I mean, there's the Warwick study recently, boys will be boys, the old one. But time and time again, when we actually measure, women are better investors.
Yep. The endorphin rush is what we're looking for. Where you get, hey, look at this. I made 20-30% over here. And then you're like, oh, how's your portfolio doing since inception? That's okay. Okay. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming on and talking about these topics, talking about some of your own experiences. I really do appreciate it. And you know, it's part of what I'm trying to commit to is being better and evolving. And you know, Cheryl said that, you know, like if I was 22, 23 years old and somebody that from then sees me now doing a women's panel, they'll be like, what are you doing? You know, like are you that person? Like, well, hey, you know what? As I evolve in this industry and as I've had great mentors from men and from women, and I learn more every day. I mean, even in social functions and trying to make sure that we're just inclusive in conversations. And, you know, nobody wants to be the person that isn't feeling involved and included. And I think sometimes when you get a group of just men together, that kind of happens, you know? And so I'm trying to advocate that for not only myself, for my spouse, for my daughter, for my son, right? And I want my son to have a better experience and be a better person. And if we're not doing these types of things together, how can you really improve? So I'm always looking to collectively take this information, apply it to business, bring more advocates in, and hopefully do some good work out there. So I appreciate you taking the time to help me to do that today.
Thank you, Jeff.
You are good people, Jeff Thomas.
You
Mhm.
are a perfect example of a great male ally.
Amen.
Mhm.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon on Investment Masterminds, I'm sure.